There we are. Look at that. Look how weird that looks. There we go.
Thank you.
Have your
I've never
just
tried
dessert.
raki before, so I'm keen to try it.
Gross.
Did you intend on mixing it with water?
Yeah, you're supposed to.
It's a party trick. Because then, when... well, you're a rugby boy, so you should know. You hang out with your friends and you serve them cum.
Like, it normally goes on a biscuit, not in a glass.
Callum, I'm not planning on joining the Conservative Party. What are you talking about?
If you really, really like aniseed, you'll love raki.
Yeah.
If you're, the one person in 1,000 that actually likes it.
Pernod, ouzo, raki, just no thanks.
I like Pernod.
Do you?
Yeah. I like limoncello as well. Obviously,
Limoncello's lovely.
It's not aniseed, but I like that as well.
Yeah, it's different, but just, no raki for me. Thanks.
All right, if you insist.
Well.
Anyway.
So, conspiracies.
Cheers.
Nice one, Rory.
I think as we drink, because everyone else has one, Beau, you should probably start with your conspiracy theory, which I quite liked, because I think it's made. So, tell the class.
So, nukes aren't real.
Isn't this Rory's?
No, this is Beau's. This is
really?
OG Beau,
Okay.
yeah.
I've said it before. But...
One thing I'll say, though, is that there is an actual conspiracy theory that claims nukes aren't real and the whole thing's a psyop from like the US and the Russians are in on it ever since the 1940s. I don't think that. I don't agree with that. I only think there's some elements to the narrative of nuclear bombs, which is weird and questionable to me. There are certainly massive bombs, right? There's no doubt about that. Giant bombs. And maybe the science behind it, fission or fusion, either one is all true and real. But what I question is the fallout side, the nuclear fallout side of it. So there was this great TV series from the 80s called Threads. I don't know if you've ever seen that.
I love that movie.
You've seen it?
Yeah.
The one where it simulates if Britain got bombed.
Yeah. And in that, they talk about, they show how the fallout would mean that like all women became infertile or just had stillbirths and stuff, and everyone would die from radiation poisoning. Anyone that wasn't killed in the blast would die of radiation poisoning. Or there's an old film from the late 50s called On the Beach, based on a novel, where again, there's been some giant nuclear exchange and the whole world is poisoned with radioactivity. And the story is that there's some people in Australia, they're the last ones before this giant globe-spanning nuclear reactive cloud kills them all. I'm just not sure if that's the case, if that's real or not. So, for example, first of all, you can go to Japan, Hiroshima or Nagasaki, Ground Zero, and it's fine. You can go there. You can go to loads of places where they've tested loads of nukes, and you can just go there. People would go. There's a place in Russia or in Kazakhstan on the Kazakh steppe, the Polygon, where the Soviets tested 450 odd nukes. You can just go there now. You don't have to wear a hazmat suit.
Well, you can go to like the site of the Trinity test.
Well, so that's the other thing.
Chernobyl's a good one.
Chernobyl's something different. But in America, only about 70 odd miles from Las Vegas, there's what used to be called the Nevada Proving Grounds, or just the Nevada test site. And they tested over 900 nukes there. It's the most nuked place in the world, not far from Vegas. People used to go from Vegas, take a day trip out and go and see the mushroom cloud.
Yeah.
And you can go there now. Again, you don't need hazmat suits or anything. So, wait a minute. Are nukes sort of massively dirty in terms of radiation or not?
Do you not think it's...
That's what I think is a bit weird. I think maybe there's a bunch of liars around that. But I don't know. I'm obviously no physicist.
Do you not think it comes into, one, the altitude that the nukes detonated at? Because obviously, if you had a ground explosion, you'd have... That's where we would fall out. And then, again, the fuel has got cleaner. So, fallout compared to a bomb that would be set off back in the 40s.
Yeah, some nukes are more dirty
cleaner
than others.
Yeah.
Sure, yeah. And they definitely do.
Yeah.
They definitely do pump out terrible radioactive particles like strontium or cesium, and they're dispersed over the whole world.
Yeah,
like you can tell if something was pre-1945 or not by anyway.
Yeah.
But whether it would cause like a nuclear winter or whether there would be just global radiation poisoning if there was a full exchange, I don't know.
Talking about pre-war steel.
Mhm.
You're talking about pre-1945 still.
Oh, in all sorts of things, you
Yeah,
can
yeah.
under microscopes and stuff.
Yeah.
They can say, well, this must have been pre-1945 because
That's why
there's
yeah.
because there's no cesium in it or something.
That's why the Chinese are desecrating war graves in the South China Sea, right? It's because it's pre-1945 still. Like, most steel in the world is now contaminated because of nuclear detonations.
But wasn't there a study or something or other? There was a phenomenon in Japan where children born in Hiroshima and Nagasaki had birth defects because of the radiation, right?
Yeah.
Is that part of the suspicion? Is that?
Well, no. So I'm not saying nukes aren't dangerous in terms of fallout and radioactivity. They are. I just don't know if they are as much as the propaganda makes you fear it is.
Big
so,
nuke.
for example, there was a classic case when the Americans detonated their first H-bomb in like 1954 or something at Castle Bravo in the Marshall Islands, Bikini Atoll. Yeah, the fallout fell on one of the nearby little atolls where there was a few natives, and yeah, they got poisoned. And a lot of the women had kids with terrible defects and stuff. So it's that, it's real, it's true. But what I'm saying is not that nukes aren't real; they are real. But just whether the fallout element of the narrative of the story, if that's been massively exaggerated,
Then, like, the world won't end up like a nuclear wasteland. Like
threads. Look, everyone dies from radiation poisoning.
Let's get this on screen. So you mentioned threads, and you can find it on the Internet Archive, funnily enough.
It's well 80s, well dated, fairly low budget, but it's also really good, right? I think it is.
Yeah, I think it's a fantastic film. Yeah. And the story, at this point that we're looking at is well after the bombs have fallen, and now people are fighting for the scraps that's left, essentially. And there's just an immense number of people who are physically damaged by the bombs. But what goes on in this movie is then it goes further into the future, in which people are reduced to living like serfs, trying to farm for food, where it's really, really hard to farm for food because of the nuclear fallout destroying the entire atmosphere.
Yeah,
or at least
all the ground,
changing the atmosphere, I should say.
All the ground has been poisoned by radioactivity.
Yeah, it's just obvious rubbish.
I don't think so.
That's why I mentioned Chernobyl earlier. Obviously, you don't want to farm there, but that's the place where essentially you had it could be equivalent to a ground detonation of a nuclear bomb, right?
I did see something quite funny to do with Chernobyl, that a map of Sweden's pornography usage mapped on perfectly to the radiation fallout from Chernobyl. So
Really?
The areas that received the highest density of radiation from Chernobyl were more likely to look up hentai, which also explains Japan, I suppose.
Sounds fake, to be honest.
It's funny. I think it's just a spurious correlation, isn't it?
But yeah, some people say that like the half-life of some of these things is like 10,000 years. Is it?
Yeah. So, as we can see here, it goes on forever. And the point is that in the film, the population of the UK goes down to, I think, a third of what it was at the time.
Right.
So never mind now, what would be a fifth or something. Like, that's the argument of how many people you could actually sustain in a frozen environment because of the fallout.
And they say that, like a lot of the men become infertile, and nearly all the women become infertile. And if you do have a birth, it's going to be like an eyeless monster or something. It's like,
or just dead.
Or never lived or whatever. Right? It's just,
I do just think nukes are completely overrated in terms of how destructive they actually are. In terms of like physically destructive in the immediate vicinity, yeah, they're bad. But most people seem to think like one nuclear bomb could take out the entire of the UK that I speak to. I think people have a completely overblown estimation of what nukes actually are.
It's one of those things that I've always been fascinated in. And if you take the biggest bomb ever made was the Soviets, the Tsar bomber. I heard that if you drop one on Edinburgh, one on Manchester, and one on London, that would spell the end of
Rory,
Britain large.
It'd be
to demonstrate this to me, you showed me that website that shows you the destructive radius of particular nuclear bombs. And
so that's called Nuke Map. I'm wondering if Jack, you can load that up.
And the Tsar bomber, if I remember, if you were to drop that on London, it would take out basically all of London and a lot of the surrounding area.
Wow,
so in terms of destructive capabilities, that still sounds pretty bad.
You've got to remember,
that sounds like a big bomb.
A Tsar bomber isn't your typical nuclear bomb.
That's why the Soviets and the Americans have like 2,000 plus, right?
Typical nuclear warhead.
5,000 plus.
Oh, is it really that many?
I think the Americans got something like 5,500, and the Soviets have got close to 6,000.
Technically, I was still correct.
The W76,
well, I think this little list.
W76, which is R1. Relatively speaking, that's not that big.
It's going out to Ealing and Barking. That's pretty big.
Compared to
I feel like
compared to the Zarn bomb, though, right?
I still feel like you're minimizing just how big an explosion that is, Rory.
Okay, well, you think about how many people died in Dresden, right, when we firebombed it,
Yes.
and then look at comparatively how many people died in Hiroshima.
It tells you how many people. I think it gives you an estimate of casualties. Or does it not?
Yeah, it does though.
Sorry, is that a Tsar bomber or is that?
Estimated fatalities.
That's the W-87.
Okay, so what you're talking about, Rory, is a dedicated campaign of firebombing done over the course of hours using hundreds of bombs on one particular city. This is one bomb.
And that's not even the biggest bomb.
Half a mil in one bomb, though.
What I'm saying is it's all relative.
So this used to be this is a personal.
You could say anything is relative. If it compared to if the sun exploded, yeah, it's pretty small.
So this is a personal obsession of mine, nuclear weapons. It's actually what I wanted to go and work into. So that's why I'm enjoying this.
Bit scary.
Why?
Callum, don't do it.
The point
Please.
Rory's making, which is true, which is the vast majority of nuclear weapons are not a Tsar bomber.
Right,
and in fact, if you scroll down on this, you'll find out. So you have the Tsar bomber, which is the one they built, which is half what they actually designed.
Yeah.
So a lot of people will show you the designed one, which is this, and that's Blow Up London, which does that. But that doesn't even exist and never did.
Yeah, right.
So that's also just a bit silly.
What about the one that they did?
Yeah, I want to see that.
There was one of
That
them.
would basically take out London and Greater London.
So this is the only one, and they built, and it was one ever, and then they never built it again.
Yeah, sure.
So there aren't any.
For sure, you
existence.
drop 3 of those, Edinburgh, Manchester, and London. Yeah, you'd fuck up the British economy, but it wouldn't destroy the entire UK.
The other thing is that they will launch an ICBM, and on one ICBM, it's got like 10 warheads or more, like 40 warheads or something stupid.
Yeah.
So, again, one ICBM could like
MEV,
carpet
they
bomb
call it, don't they?
10 or 20 or 30 or 40 nukes across a landscape.
Yeah, wow.
Uh,
But I mean, I'm talking about one nuke, right? What, relatively speaking,
Relatively speaking, only almost 600,000 people die in the blink of an eye.
You're not listening to what I'm saying. I'm talking about general destructive capability, like one modern US nuke. It's going to do a lot of damage, but it's basically the same as like a week's worth of bombing.
Like also if it just falls out of a plane, let's say you're transferring and it blows up here, for example.
Yeah.
Let's see who we killed. We've taken out Daventry. Very sad. But,
I still would rather not have the British landscape in any way being peppered with nukes in any area.
No one's saying they're
controversial. You don't want to nuke Britain.
I feel like this diminishing of their destructive capabilities is very strange.
British nationalists is like, I stand against nuking Britain. Vote for me.
This is the new Tory party platform.
and one ray of hope, the thing I'm saying, is that
they might not be real.
The fallout might not be as devastating as we have been led to believe.
Mm-hmm.
So it might actually be okay quite quickly. Like in the Nevada proving grounds, people would go into the crater straight away without any hazmat suits on or things, just walk into the...
That wasn't a good idea.
Yeah, it's probably not a good idea, but it's sort of, they did.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And you can look at a map of the fallout from, again, decades and hundreds of nukes being detonated there. And a lot of the fallout went just basically across Nevada and Utah.
Well,
Utah doesn't suffer from a crazy high number of like birth deficiencies or anything really.
Well, aren't there a bunch of Mormons there?
So you wouldn't know any different.
Yeah.
No, I don't.
I'm sorry, it was a cheap joke.
But then again, it all depends on the altitude you detonate it at. If you detonate it at 0 meters sea level,
you get this.
You're going to get fucked. If you detonate it at 300 feet in the air,
so I'll do an airburst, which is what we just saw. There's far less spread.
That's literally based.
So this is where I think I'm going to try and debunk it.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
So my thinking on this, and again, I'm sure there's people who know better than me on this, is that what you're thinking of is the very early bombs, especially. And the big difference between the two here is if we're engaging in World War III, the theory is, at least in threads, that you would be firing all the weapons that exist, and they would all be surface blasts. And the point of fallout is not that radiation exists or doesn't. It obviously does, like you're saying. But the point of fallout is that the pieces of dirt, so the ground that becomes radioactive, mass amounts of that get thrown up into the atmosphere. And if you blow up every piece of arsenal that the US, the UK, France, and Russia has, their theory is that that amount of dirt that would go into the air is what causes the mass destruction. and that's the fallout rather than the nukes themselves.
Nuclear winter.
So when you blow them up,
it blots out the sun.
Yeah,
I just
So I don't know for specifically, but I imagine it is the case that in Las Vegas, for example, they would do an air blast to minimize this sort of damage.
Yeah, they would.
Well, in Nevada, they did everything you can think of. They did things at altitude, things on towers, things on the ground, things under the ground. They did everything.
Yeah.
Anything you can think of. They did it multiple times.
I'm not sure they did a ground burst. I know they did an air burst. They did the underground ones as well.
They did.
In deep chambers.
They did loads of ground bursts until there was a certain point where they agreed. There was in the, in the 70s, I think there was the SALT talks. There was they agreed to limit stuff.
Yeah.
At some point.
So I'm showing here, like, if you had a little boy, I don't know exactly which weapons they use for those tests, but I imagine from that time period, it's this sort of thing. You're looking at this sort of damage, which, again, they're doing it in the desert. But the fallout here, I'm trying to say, is probably much smaller than what is being argued in Threads, which is
for
modern
Americans, that's
weaponry
literally like an hour's worth of driving, probably less.
Yeah.
Callum, to help me understand this, would you be able to put the point of detonation above Birmingham, please?
I will do that for no reason whatsoever.
Thank you.
Which weapon would you like to
Oh, look,
choose?
Nottingham gets it.
North
if you
Korean, why not?
If you nuke Birmingham, Nottingham gets the full.
Yeah, we'll use a Pakistani weapon for no
All right.
reason.
Good choice, actually.
I happen to know which neighborhood is most likely to be bombed for no reason.
I too have looked up the census data that is completely irrelevant to this decision.
There you are. About 300,000 people's lives ruined and 92,000 dead immediately. So
300,000 people's lives ruined, but how many
Yeah,
are improved, Callum?
At least bull ring isn't there anymore.
yeah, you can also change the wind on this. This is just fun. I use this a lot in university to make several presentations about what I would do. if I
People
was
call me
king.
the crazy scientist. I wasn't experimenting with nukes. I was just shocking people's brains.
Washington.
Well, I was going to do what Beau's talking about because I think that's...
Oh yeah, that's a good
just
idea.
northwest of Vegas. About there, yeah, around there, somewhere like there.
I'm just going to grab the wind so we can bring that back. There we are. Let's say the wind goes that way.
Go up to Indian Springs.
Let's blow up a Pakistani bomb and make it a nice surface detonation. Let's do that. There we go. We've done 0 deaths, 0 fatalities with this one because nobody lives there on that one. But the point being the radiation of interest. Which so my attempt at debunking it is that I think the arguments are different.
Yeah.
So dealing with small weapons in this sort of area for a specific reason
Versus a full exchange of thousands of nukes. Right, yeah, no, fair enough.
The Steelman argument is that would create so much dirt that's radioactive in the atmosphere that you get the same thing as what's the medieval winter that everyone talks about?
It's a medieval mini ice age.
Yeah, like there's a series of volcanic eruptions, and it just so happens that Europe got completely buggered by it.
And we had 3 different volcanic eruptions. I think is the
There was a big one in the 19th century. It's
Krakatoa.
Yeah.
You had Tobago, something like that.
But
that was in sort of Indonesia way, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was one of the biggest eruptions.
Can't remember.
I know also that modern nukes or some nukes are much more dirty than others.
Yeah.
I know the very first one the Brits ever did was really, really dirty. And I think
dirty British.
And
nukes.
I think like the Tsar bomber, for example, was really clean, quite clean, considering its size and everything.
Because the explosion is so vast that it actually burns all of the radioactive material is the idea.
Maybe, yeah. I mean, a hydrogen bomb, I think H bombs are cleaner than A bombs anyway.
Yeah.
And the bigger they get for some reason, the cleaner they could potentially be. I don't know. But anyway.
I tell you what, that's a clean burning nuke.
So to say that nukes aren't real, I don't think that. Of course they're real, but just...
I prefer that one. To watch the full video, please become a premium member at lotuseaters.com.